that's all like welcome to NBA Muslims Art and Society. I'm very, very honored to be joined today by Sameera Qureshi from Heart Women and Girls. We've had some technical difficulties, but hopefully now it works better. You can hear me, right?
Absolutely. You are smooth, mashallah, as always.
I'm smooth now. I don't know how smooth I've been. Okay. Well, first of all, I'm totally throwing my husband under the bus. I said, I'm telling everybody on Facebook. Okay. He's like, okay, go ahead. You can tell them. All right. So my husband worked. Oh, that's much better. My husband works 90 hours a week, as everyone knows, because I posted it. And so one of the things that's very, very important to him is that when he's home and he's able to like eat dinner, he likes to eat dinner with everybody. Okay. Including me. So he cooks, okay, and then he goes around the house and he collects people. And he said, Layla, you've got to come and eat dinner. And so I said, okay, I'll come and eat dinner. Now, which would be fine if I got to eat and leave. But he likes to eat and have a conversation and talk. Which is a wonderful thing, I know. It's a wonderful, beautiful thing. But I got caught up in him. So and I just like, what time is it? He's like, don't worry, you can blame me. I'll take the blame. So everyone blame Papa Bear.
That is the most amazing, beautiful reason to be late.
Okay, thanks. So I'm forgiven.
Oh,
you were very smooth about it.
I endorse you being late for that reason. That is a beautiful model that I hope everyone can have.
Okay, that's why I was like, because he can't stand that we eat when he's not home. We tend to eat in our own little enclaves and stuff, and he cannot stand it. He's like, no, I have this wife and family. I want them all at the table with me and eating with me. So, and then it's always fun, and then you get caught up. All right, so now,
beautiful thing. No worries.
We have some stuff to talk about. All right,
just a little.
So sex myths, facts, and rape culture. And we can only just kind of like scratch the surface type of thing. So everyone knows that. So please no direct messages. You forgot this, you forgot that, forgot this. We're probably going to forget more than we're going to have the time to actually address and talk about. But this is about starting conversations, which I think is very, very important because Muslim culture especially is so dragged down by a lot of misconceptions when it comes to sex and intimacy, and also things that create victimization of people and sexual abuse. And it's something that we have not learned to tackle effectively. And I think the more conversations that we have about it, the better. And then like increases. Okay. So I wanted to start right off the bat. I started at the bat. Like everyone knows I shoot from the hip. Okay.
Go for it. I'm ready.
Right. So the first one is uncontrollable male libido. All right. Yeah. So what does it mean when folks say sex drive and that men are thought to have an uncontrollable one? Is that true?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And people talk about sex like it's a do or die. You know, like biological drive is like hunger and thirst and your body temperature. No one's died from not having sex, I hope. I don't think. And so sex isn't a drive, right?
Okay.
It's not all or nothing. Like once it's on, like you've just got to go or you need it for survival. It's super complex. And like you said, with all the shame in our community, I don't think we talk about sex in a complex way. We simplify it, right? And it's much more complex than that.
Do we simplify it because we're so uncomfortable with it?
Yeah, that's a really good theory. And I think we don't learn about sex from the right sources, right? We maybe inherit a lot of myths from our families, from our communities. We sure don't have Muslim scholars going around talking about sex. So, you know, we don't turn to sex researchers like maybe you and I do in our fields, but folks don't have access to that, right? So they learn naturally from their environment. And a lot of what they learn is not true. And they have nothing else to replace that information, so they grow up thinking that it's true. And that's the problem.
Okay, so it's a matter of, there's certain times in people's lives where conversations about sex are supposed to take a shift. So say for instance, when you're young, conversations about sex is usually very surrounded with a lot of mystery and a lot of misconceptions. And hopefully by the time you reach adulthood and are ready to engage in sexual dialogue with another person, some, if not ideally all of that, has kind of like weighed to you've become more educated about it. Do you think that the society in general is that's happening? And is it happening in Muslim society less so, or it's pretty much kind of like the same?
It's kind of the same. So what I've seen, and I've worked everywhere from kids who are 3 and 4 years old, teaching them about safety and saying no to touches, all the way to adults. So it's interesting. Conversations don't happen. So kids learn what they hear in their environment, and a lot of it's wrong. They hit puberty and pornography becomes their sex educator. Their friends become their sex educators. And when we work with women and men both, a lot of them say it's not till their 20s that they looking into things, and they're like, wait a second, like something's off. I need the right information. And so they're having to undo those many years of misinformation, of myths, and unlearning all of the wrong stuff that they learned about sexuality later in life in their 20s. Whereas if we taught them at a developmental rate, like when you learn this when you're 13, when you're 18, like you said, that'll be easier to deal with. But now I think a lot of our folks are unpacking stuff and having to relearn, and that's time consuming, right? And it's frustrating, especially if you've experienced trauma, how much unlearning you got to do, right?
So let's get back to this misconception about the uncontrollable male libido. I like the idea that you said, that you mentioned drive, how they say sex drive. When can you get me another lamp, please? Because I don't have enough light. Yeah, the tall lamp from the living room. That there's not enough drive. Okay, right. And so, like you said, if you are starving, you're motivated to behave in certain ways that you usually won't. Okay, so like for instance, the Donner Party, who ended up, they was trapped in the Midwest, in the mountains, in the snow, and they ended up eating each other.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that sex is different, that it's not something that where you reach a certain point of not having sex, and that kind of makes certain behaviors acceptable because of the extenuating circumstance of I haven't had sex that long. So I get to behave a certain way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So first of all, the center of our sexuality is not between the legs, it's in our head. Okay. So this idea, right, that the genitals are the driving force is wrong. It's the brain. Mm-hmm. And the second part, instead of a drive, we have to use a 2-part model. And this is all based on sex research. And I can this is an amazing book, by the way. This is all from this book, Come As You Are. Yeah. We have an accelerator and we have a brake system, right? Okay. So some people have really sensitive accelerators where they go and they feel like their arousal is strong. But most of us have also sensitive brakes. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. The light's like shining on you like Noor. So we have accelerator and a brake, and those two work together. So for those people who are like, man, I have a really strong sex drive. No, your accelerator is just probably more sensitive, or you have a hard time hitting the brakes. But it's not a do or die situation, right? Even though it feels frustrating for you, you're not going to die from not having sex. And that's the misconception that can lead to assault, right? That men who are mostly the most perpetrators will say, well, uncontrollable libido, it's the woman's fault. What am I supposed to do? It's like, use your head, first of all, and go take care of it privately in a room, right? You don't assault someone. It's, this excuse is absolutely not warranted.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, because this whole idea of the male sexual libido has given a little bit of an excuse, I think, to men to behave certain ways. Like, boys will be boys. They can't help it. And they think about sex all the time. Okay, well, you can think about sex all the time. That doesn't mean that you didn't turn around and use those thoughts to adversely affect me as a human being, and it seems like that seems to be something that's prevalent in the society, was just like this whole idea that they can't control themselves. Now, you said that it's in your head, so the driving force for sex is in your head. So as the different thought processes that people have, are there men that just don't necessarily, or that don't necessarily think about sex that way consistently? Is it something that they may think about sex that way consistently? If they do, how can society teach and train people that you still have a level of responsibility, you still have a level of control, and your rampant desire for sex doesn't give you permission to pursue it in a way that's detrimental to a potential partner?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are a couple ways people experience libido. The first is spontaneous, which is half of men, and this is based on research, so half of men will have spontaneous libido or desire. Only 10 to 20% of women will. Okay. The other word is responsive, which means it's in response to something happening, right? Your partner, being stress-free, having intimate moments together. So 50% of men and 75% of women have responsive libido. Okay. So I think because we live in such a hypersexualized society, I wonder how much of what men are calling to be like uncontrollable libido is actually taught from that. And if that's the case, and if you look at the way pornography is also, it's the same thing. It's seen as an uncontrollable, spontaneous desire. I think a lot of it has to be unlearned by learning about sex, by learning about the fact that there's a mechanism and you can override it, but you haven't been taught to override it. And you've been given permission by society to enact your sexuality on other people. So I think if men are taught mechanism, men are being,
because if you do that, you're a woman, you're a hoe.
Absolutely. There's a whole nother set of myths for that and a whole bunch of words for that, right? But it's okay that you're a man because boys will be boys, right? And once you have the urge, it's an all or nothing. But that's dangerous. There's a mechanism and there's breaks and you can use it, but you've never been taught, right? Because all you've been taught is you have this urge, then go for it. But that's not the case, right?
Now, how does that conversely affect men or boys who have responsive libidos in this culture of you're supposed to have this uncontrollable urge to have sex consistently and you simply don't as a male in this society? How does that affect them, and does it end up encouraging some aggressive behavior that normally it may not, if they were really able to appreciate their libido in the way that it works?
Yeah, I think first they experience a lot of shame from their male peers, probably, if they're even talking about this. I'm guessing they're not, but they already probably feel internalized shame because when you look around you, there aren't men saying, it takes me a while to get turned on and aroused. Men don't say that, right? Mm-hmm. So they probably have shame. They think that something might be wrong. And so that might lead to medical explorations, which there's nothing wrong with seeing a physician, but a lot of times it's your context, it's in your head. And so internally things can happen for those men. But you're right. I think like we had spoken about before about women using men to gain sex. And if a man isn't spontaneously aroused, there are women who take advantage of that and spiritually and emotionally manipulate that. So it's all about understanding that there's a range, and for men to be outside of that stereotypical box is normal, but we just don't ever talk about it because it's seen as unmanly, wrong, and something's biologically wrong with you because your drive is broken.
Your drive is broken because you don't want it all day, every day, anytime. And you're not immediately ready and prepared. Is that something? I know that there's a tendency to think of women as having to, like you said, they're responsive. They have to, and a lot of times it requires
Mm.
certain actions. Are there men like that? So are there men that if you have a spouse, could you potentially have a spouse that you have to romance, that you have to make feel a certain way in order
Mhm.
for his desire? We can't have this automatic assumption that you're a male and now I want you, so you're going to perform for me. It
Yeah.
should women be a little bit more learn more about their spouse, whether or not their spouse is has a responsive libido and needs to be romanced themselves.
Yeah, completely. And you know what's fascinating, Layla? I bet you there are many couples out there who are having sex, they're intimate, and I don't think they've talked about this, right? Because, life happens. We're not taught to talk about sex with our partners, right? It's uncomfortable. It's really a physical and spiritual thing if you see it that way, but there are there are couples who don't talk about this, and it's fascinating. I don't blame them, because who has the language to talk about this, right? Like, how do you talk to your partner about their desire and what they need, like what kind of foreplay they like,
You
what kind
open
of
this.
environment? Yeah,
You
you think
open
it's like,
this.
yeah, one person has to do it. And yeah,
I think we're not
and
encouraged to do it. And I think that's one of the things, and I'm just going to
absolutely.
kind of like hone it a little bit into American Muslim society. And I think that we do not have the conversations that say and encourage people to have conversations with their partner. So
Mhm.
even like when you think about, like you said, the scholars and everything, even when they do address sex, it's it. I've only heard one that really dug a little bit deeper into it and talked
Mhm.
about it and answered those tough questions, and that was Waleed Bassiouni. Other than
Mhm.
that, it's always like this surface level type of thing. So it's like, no one's standing on the minbar saying, "Listen, you need to be talking to your partner." Okay, no one's
Right.
saying at the nikah. All right,
Mhm.
you have to satisfy each other, and one of the best ways of doing that is to have a conversation before and immediately after sex, and talk
Mhm.
about what it is that you liked and disliked, and build a comfort with each other, so that when things change, which they always do, when
Yeah.
it comes to
Yeah.
sex, that you
Yeah.
can continue to have those conversations, because it's never a one conversation thing. It's always
No.
conversation after conversation. Now, if men are do they perpetuate this misconception about the libido, having this strong libido or unchecked libido amongst each other, and do they immediately attribute it to manhood?
I think that's a really safe statement to say yes to.
Okay,
I
and
think
they're
yeah,
the ones that are having conversations about sex with each other and not necessarily their partner. So
absolutely. Yeah.
as a male, you can be having sex with your partner, not having a conversation with your partner about sex, and then going to men who hold these misconceptions about sex and having
Mhm.
conversations with them about sex.
Right.
Okay, and so how can that potentially affect the sexual relationship between people, and also even like between potential partners? So let's
Mhm.
take the whole broad range. Okay, because let's be honest, let's not act like Muslims are not
Yeah,
having sex outside of marriage.
absolutely.
They are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's like the whole range of a potential partner, and what happens when all the information you're getting is from this environment of misconceptions.
You, first of all, bring that into your relationship, 100%. Um, Men are taught to brag about sexuality because it's tied to manhood. And there's this idea, I think even Muslim Americans have this, of the conquest of a woman, of the strong sexual desire and libido. And what do you mean I need to talk about sex with my wife? Like,
Mm.
what is there to talk about, right? Like, I'm satisfied, she's having sex. What is there to talk about? What do you mean it can be improved? What do you mean that sex is only really good after many years of intimate conversation and intimacy with a partner? There's this, like, comes from porn in society that when you have sex there's fireworks. and it happens right away. It's like, well, no, there's time, right? It's a complex act, and sex is not just physical. So all the stuff you're bringing in, and men are not taught to talk about that, to unpack that, because it's masculinity based, it's conquest based, right? So they're not going to sit their wives down and be like, we need to talk.
Did you like that? What did you think
Yeah.
about that? I tried
Yeah.
something here. What did you think?
Right. Right. Or, you know, how was that for you?
How was that for you? I think they may be afraid of the answer. How was that for you? And the woman feels comfortable to say that. There may be a fear. I mean, on both sides, you may just have like this fear that your partner may say, yeah. But it's okay. It is okay, because guess what? Right. Now, what do I need to do to get that? Oh yeah, I'm good. Yeah. But if we never have those conversations, they keep that inside, and it goes to other the
well, you got to think too, sex is so personal that, I mean, we take it personally when we feel like we're not pleasing our partner, right? Because we attribute that to something that's wrong with us. So it's so vulnerable, right? Even though sex is vulnerable, it's more vulnerable to folks that, oh, like I didn't completely please my partner. Yeah. And it should be a feedback loop, right? Sex is not linear. It's a feedback loop, right? You do it, you talk about it, you learn, and you keep having these conversations, you know, just as you raise kids, you keep having conversations, and sex is no different. But like you said, we're not taught, there's shame, we don't have the language. And do we invest the time into it? I don't know that we do, right? We invest time in sex maybe, but do we invest time in making sure it's the best sex that we have? I don't think
we invest time in sex. I don't think that we invest time in sex. The reason why we don't invest time in sex is because we're not having conversations about it. We're not having conversations about it in the society in general. We're not having productive conversations about it with our partners. So we're not investing time, because sex, so much of sex, like you said, is about the mind and how the person's feeling and everything like that. And and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why men are always confused as to why it is that a woman isn't sexually responsive, because you're not thinking about, you haven't been investing the time from before you got married. I need to learn how to satisfy a woman, and vice versa. But right now we're dealing with the men. I need to learn how to satisfy a woman, my wife. I need to learn how to do that from before my penis gets hard. Okay? Absolutely. Because if I don't do that, and I'm going to keep it simple, if they don't do that before the penis gets hard, it's just going to stay hard, because it's like, forget it. Or you may have to, then you make the person vulnerable to more aggressive behavior, which is just flat out wrong. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.